2025 in climate change. This article documents notable events, research findings, scientific and technological advances, and human actions to measure, predict, mitigate, and adapt to the effects of global warming and climate change during the year 2025. A. Brooke. Summaries. When our children and grandchildren look back at the history of human-made climate change, this year, 2023, and next 2024 will be seen as the turning point at which the futility of governments in dealing with climate change was finally exposed. Brooke. We are on the cusp of a new era. Fossil fuels are running out of road. The sun is rising on a clean energy age. I. Burque. May Andre Correa do Lago, director of the 2025 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP30 in Brazil, said, "It is not possible to have scientific denialism at this stage after everything that has happened in recent years." So there is a migration from scientific denial to a denial that economic measures against climate change can be good for the economy and for people. 3. May, a study published in Bioscience said that climate change has joined overexploitation and habitat alteration to become a third major threat to Earth's animals. June, the Energy Institute's statistical review of world energy suggested that 2025 may be the beginning of a paradigm shift in which the energy transition is driven by pursuit of energy security through energy independence, risk hedging in a volatile and uncertain environment, and seeking resilient, decentralized, and clean energy systems, rather pursuing climate change mitigation per se. Measurements and statistics. 10 January, a summary from the Copernicus Climate Change Service stated that 2024 was the warmest year since records began in 1850, with an average global surface temperature reaching 1.6 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, surpassing for the first time the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming target set by the Paris Agreement. The summary also stated that 2024 was the second consecutive year with the hottest global temperature, surpassing 2023 by 0.12 degrees Celsius. 21 January, a study published in Nature Climate Change concluded that at least 30% of the Arctic has become a net source of carbon dioxide. 11 January, a study published in Environmental Research Letters reported that global mean sea surface temperature increases had more than quadrupled, from 0.06 K per decade during 1985 to 89 to 0.27 K per decade for 2019 to 23, and projected that the increase inferred over the past 40 years would likely be exceeded within the next 20 years. 12. 3 February, a study co-authored by James Hansen published in Environment concluded that the IPCC had underestimated the effect of aerosols, planet cooling, radiative forcing after enactment of international regulation of maritime aerosol emissions in the 2020s designed to improve air quality. 8. This underestimation of aerosols' effect was said to cause underestimation of climate sensitivity. Hansen et al., writing that the reduction in aerosols explains the unexpectedly large global warming experienced in 2023 to 2024. 10 February, a study published in Nature Climate Change shows that the first single calendar year above 1.5 degrees Celsius relative to pre-industrial levels in 2024 indicates that most probably Earth has already entered the 20-year period that will reach the Paris Agreement limit. That is, a 20-year period with average warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius. 24 February, a study published by the nonprofit Initiative on GHG Accounting of War estimated that the 3 years of the Russian invasion of Ukraine had caused 230 MMT-CO2e metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. Citing warfare, buildings reconstruction, landscape fires, damage to energy infrastructure, refugee and civil aviation displacement. 7 March, a study by World Weather Attribution concluded that in a February 2025 heat wave, climate change made extreme heat at least 2 degrees Celsius hotter and at least 10 times more likely. 15. World Glaciers Day, established by the UN General Assembly, the World Meteorological Organization reported that 5 of the past 6 years witnessed the most rapid glacier retreat on record, and 2022 to 2024 witnessed the largest 3-year loss of glacier mass on record. Witness study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences concluded that since 1940, global warming has tripled the number of days per year that the oceans experience extreme surface heat conditions, and is responsible for a 1 degree Celsius increase in maximum intensity of marine heat wave events. 10 May, a study published in AGU Advances said that observations from space show that Earth's energy imbalance in 2023 reached values that were twice that of the best estimate from the IPCC, and cautioned that the ability to observe this imbalance is deteriorating because satellites are being decommissioned. May, a study jointly published by Climate Central, the Red Cross Red Crescent Climate Center, and World Weather Attribution concluded that in the preceding year, 4 billion people experienced at least 30 additional days of extreme heat because of climate change, and that in 195 countries and territories, climate change at least doubled the number of extreme heat days as compared to a world without climate change. 9. 5 June reported for the first time, NOAA's Mauna Loa Observatory measured an atmospheric carbon dioxide concentration of over 430 parts per million. 16 June, a study published in Nature Communications found that higher temperatures, 27.3 degrees Celsius versus 6.4 degrees Celsius, were associated with a 45% higher probability of having obstructive sleep apnea on a given night. June, a study published in Nature concluded that global warming reduces crop production by 4.4% of recommended caloric consumption for each 1 degree Celsius of global warming, though adaptation measures can reduce losses. 21. July. The International Renewable Energy Agency's renewable power generation cost 2024 said that on a levelized cost of electricity ELCO basis, 91% of new renewable utility scale capacity delivered power at a lower cost than the cheapest new fossil fuel-based alternative. New onshore wind projects had an LCOE of $0.034 kWh, solar photovoltaic $0.043 kWh, and hydropower $0.057 kWh. 22. 7 July. A study published in Nature Geoscience reported that changes in long-duration heat waves increase non-linearly with temperature, with increments of warming increasing the durations more than proportionately. August, applying extreme event attribution, a study published in Nature Ecology and Evolution concluded that human-caused intensification of heat extremes caused a 25 to 38% reduction in global abundance of tropical birds from 1950 to 2020. 24. 25 August. An article published in Nature Climate Change reported the results of a 15-year study that concluded that long-term exposure to heat waves accelerated the aging process, with manual workers, rural residents, and participants from communities with fewer air conditioners being more susceptible to health impacts. August, a study published in Nature Climate Change concluded that tropical deforestation to induce local warming is associated with 23,610 to 33,560 heat-related deaths per year. 26. 3 September, noting that the planet's carbon sequestration capacity is not unlimited, a study published in Nature concluded that fully using Earth's geologic storage capacity would help limit global warming by only 0.7 degrees Celsius, 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Applying extreme event attribution to 213 historical heat waves from 2000 to 2023, a study published in Nature concluded that human-caused climate change made the median of heat waves in 2000 to 2009 about 20 times more likely than a pre-industrial baseline, and heat waves in 2010 to 2019 about 200 times more likely. 28 specifically, the study concluded that fossil fuel and cement producers enabled 16 to 53 heat waves that would have been virtually impossible in a pre-industrial climate. 10 September, a study published in Nature attributed 3,400 to 7,400 acute deaths in North America and 37,800 to 30,900 chronic deaths in North America and Europe to PM2.5 fine particulate matter exposure from the 2023 Canadian wildfires. October, Ember's Global Electricity Mid-to-Year Insights 2025 reported that in the first half of 2025, renewables overtook coal generation for the first time on record, 34.3% versus 33.1% of global electricity. October Global Tipping Points Report 2025 said that warm water coral reefs are crossing their thermal tipping point and experiencing unprecedented dieback. Natural events and phenomena. 1 January, a study published in Science Advances concluded that faster flow of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current ACC at higher latitudes causes upwelling of isotopically light deep waters around Antarctica, likely increasing atmospheric carbon dioxide levels and thereby potentially constituting a critical positive feedback for future warming. 6 January, a study published in Nature Climate Change stated that a fungal pathogen, Entomophaga maimaga, that had successfully controlled the defoliation of the spongy moth in North American forests was becoming less effective due to climate change, producing hotter, drier conditions. The study predicts this will lead to significantly decreased forest biodiversity and productivity by spongy moths, evidenced by recent increases in defoliation. January, NOAA's Arctic Report Card 2024 reported that, including the impact of increased wildfires, the Arctic tundra region had shifted from storing carbon in the soil to becoming a carbon dioxide source, and that the Arctic remained a consistent source of methane, both adding to planet-warming greenhouse gases in the air. January, a study published in Nature concluded that 1/4 of 23,496 decapod crustaceans, fishes, and odonnates studied, some of which provide climate change mitigation, are threatened with extinction. 35, 1/5 of threatened freshwater species are affected by climate change and severe weather events. Threatened by January, a study published in Nature Reviews Earth and Environment estimated that since the mid-20th century, global average 3-month and 12-month hydroclimate whiplash events have increased by 31 to 66% and 8 to 31% respectively. 36 such increases amplify hazards associated with rapid swings between wet and dry states, including flash floods, wildfires, landslides, and disease outbreaks. 36. Hydroclimate volatility refers to sudden, large, and/or frequent transitions between very dry and very wet conditions. A study published in Weather reported that the terrestrial biosphere's rate of natural carbon dioxide sequestration has fallen since its 2000 and 8 peak at a rate of 0.25% per year, a decline that will accelerate climate change. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences reported an abrupt, coherent, climate-driven transformation from blue, more transparent, to brown, less transparent states of lakes in Greenland after a season of both record heat and rainfall drove a state change in these systems. This change was said to alter numerous physical, chemical, and biological lake features, and the state changes were said to be unprecedented. February, though polar bears and grizzly bears traditionally occupy distinct habitats, marine and land, Arctic warming has forced polar bears inland into grizzly bear habitats where the two species mate to produce hybrid growler bears that have characteristics poorly adapted to either marine or land habitats. Or February, a study published in Environmental Research Letters concluded that, in addition to the 2023 marine heat wave, an extensive river plume caused a approximately 10 to 20 mm, 33 to 66 feet, thick, strongly stratified barrier layer that contributed to Hurricane Idalia's rapid intensification, Category 1 to Category 4 in less than 24 hours. 21, a study published in NPJ Natural Hazards, Unified Studies of Climatic Trends and of Wildland-Urban Interface WUI expansion, and concluded that climatic factors increased the frequency of high-risk fire weather by a factor of 2.5, and that the combination of climatic factors with WUI expansion led to a 4.1-fold increase in the frequency of conditions conducive to extreme impact wildfires from 1990 to 2022, across California. 41, 26 February, a study published in Nature concluded that the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, is resilient to extreme greenhouse gas and North Atlantic freshwater forcings across 34 climate models, suggesting that an AMOC collapse is unlikely in the 21st century. 26 February, a study published in Science Advances concluded that short, mid, and long-term ambient outdoor heat can significantly accelerate epigenetic aging in older adults. 5 March, a study published in Geophysical Research Letters concluded that redistribution of mass caused by melting of ice sheets and glaciers will shift the Earth's rotational poles from 12 to 27 meters, 39 to 89 feet by 2100, depending on the degree of future global warming. 44, changing Earth's rotational axis affects spacecraft navigation and orientation of deep space telescopes. 10 March, a study published in Nature Sustainability projected that climate change's cooling of the atmosphere occupied by space debris in low Earth orbit will reduce the atmosphere's drag on the debris, extending the debris's lifetime and potentially causing a 50 to 66% reduction in satellite carrying capacity at altitudes 200 to 1,000 km, 100 and altitude 620 in altitude. 2 March, an article published in Nature said that 2 major natural events occurred at the end of the last ice age. Around 10,300 and 8,300 years ago, sea levels surged rapidly due to meltwater releases from the North American and Antarctic ice sheets, with peak rates of sea level rise reaching nearly 9 millimeters a year, comparable to projections for the year 2100 under high emissions scenarios. 25 March, an article published in Nature said that volcanic eruptions over the past 603 years have significantly impacted the strength and tilt of the Atlantic jet stream, which in turn influenced extreme weather events in Europe. These jet stream shifts contributed to increased droughts when moving north and heightened flood risk when shifting south. 47, 10 April, NOAA published a statement that after a few months of La Nina conditions, the tropical Pacific was ENSO neutral and was likely to remain so through autumn, stating the most recent La Nina phase was very brief. 21 April, NOAA confirmed the Earth was experiencing its 4th global coral bleaching event, which it called the biggest to date. From January 1st, 2023 to April 20th, 2025, bleaching level heat stress had impacted 83.7% of the world's coral reef area, and mass coral bleaching had been documented in at least 83 countries and territories. 30 April, a study published in Nature Communications described how melting of sea ice caused by global warming allows increased areas of open water, which passes a narrower spectrum of light than the smooth continuum of frequencies passed by sea ice, to cause major changes in both the pigment and species composition of primary producers in polar ecosystems. 50, these changes affect photosynthesis in ocean phytoplankton. 6 May, a study published in Nature Communications concluded that glacial melt is accelerated even when ocean temperatures are constant, a phenomenon caused when cold, fresh meltwater rushing from beneath glaciers creates upward turbulence, drawing in warm ocean water from below. 8 May, NOAA's April 2025 U.S. climate report documented a slow-moving storm system that brought over 150 tornadoes to the South and Midwest, resulting in at least 24 fatalities and widespread flooding. This event underscores the increasing frequency of severe convective storms in a warming climate. May, a study published in Communications, Earth and Environment, concluded that merely maintaining a global average temperature of 1.5 degrees Celsius is inadequate to avoid extensive loss and damage to coastal populations in coming centuries, and hypothesized that plus 1 degree Celsius above pre-industrial, possibly even lower, is required to avoid such loss and damage. A study published, Communications, Earth and Environment, suggested that as glacial melt exposes soil, glacial meltwater's net sequestration of carbon dioxide gives way to water from exposed soil that enhances methane and carbon dioxide production, switching from a negative to positive warming feedback. in a study published in Nature concluded that atmospheric evaporative demand, AD, atmospheric thirst, causing moisture to be removed from the Earth's surface, has increased drought severity by an average of 40% globally. 55. June, a study published in Global Change Biology suggested that by 2020, global ocean acidity conditions had already crossed into the uncertainty range of the planetary boundary framework. June, a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences reported a tripling in the past half-century of the number of planetary wave events caused by quasi-resonant amplification, QRA. Such wave events underlie extreme weather events such as heat waves, flooding, wildfires, and heat dome events. Such a findings in a study published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences suggested that current Earth system models overestimate the ability of northern temperate forests to absorb carbon because the models do not consider the impacts of shrinking snowpack and increased soil freeze-thaw cycles. 14 July, a study published in Communications, Earth and Environment said that accelerated East Asian reduction in aerosol emissions unmasked greenhouse gas-driven warming, enough to be a main driver of the accelerated global warming since 2010. 59. 5 August, a study published in Geophysical Research Letters concluded that a slowdown in the rate of Arctic sea ice decline since 2005 is largely due to natural climate variation. 60. The study forecast that the slowdown could continue for another 5 to 10 years, although a faster than average sea ice decline would be more likely thereafter. To September, a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences reported that the Gulf of Panama's seasonal upwelling failed in early 2025, breaking a 40-year record of reliability, which the researchers said underscores how climate disruption can threaten wind-driven tropical upwelling systems. 10 September, a study published in Aerospace assessed how a warming atmosphere could reduce aircraft climb angles by 2035 to 2064 and concluded that the number of people affected by aircraft-generated noise pollution could increase by up to 4%, and that the effects are maximized for the most damaging and psychologically annoying low frequencies. The World Meteorological Organization's State of Global Water Resources Report 2024 concluded that only 1/3 of river basins had normal hydrological conditions in 2024, and that all glacier regions lost ice for a third straight year.
Center for Climate Impact Research assessed that the ocean acidification boundary had been breached for the first time, with ocean acidity entering its danger zone, the 7th of 9 critical Earth system boundaries to have been exceeded. Actions and goal statements. 12 February, a study published in Bird Study found that solar farms can benefit bird abundance and biodiversity in arable-dominated landscapes, especially when managed with biodiversity in mind. March, advising policymakers to assimilate uncertainty into decision-making to increase decarbonization. A study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences urged a portfolio approach of planting diverse species of trees, as that approach reduces exposure to downside cost extremes. May reported a technique involves pumping water from beneath Arctic ice and spraying it on top of the ice. It quickly refreezes, thickening the ice in that location so that it lasts longer into the warm months and increases the amount of planet-warming sunlight that is reflected back into space. Spring, 2 Chinese companies announced battery technology to enable electric vehicles to drive hundreds of miles on a 5-minute charge. 68, BYD company developed a battery with a peak charging capacity of 1,000 kilowatts, compared to U.S. chargers with peak rates of 400 kilowatts or less. Climate change is an existential problem of planetary proportions that imperils all forms of life and the very health of our planet. A complete solution to this daunting and self-inflicted problem requires the contribution of all fields of human knowledge, whether law, science, economics, or any other. Berkeley, 20 January. Within hours of his inauguration, U.S. President Donald Trump signed an executive order to withdraw the country from the 2015 Paris Agreement, joining Iran, Libya, and Yemen as the only countries not party to the agreement. For March, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump withdrew the country's representatives from the board of the United Nations Loss and Damage Fund,
which was formed to help poor and vulnerable nations cope with climate change to fuel disasters. 71, 13 March, the Costa Rica-based Inter-American Court of Human Rights ordered the Ecuadorian government to protect indigenous people from oil operations, to leave oil in the ground underneath their lands, and to ensure future oil operations do not impact indigenous peoples living in voluntary isolation. 14 March, 440 Olympic athletes from 90 countries and 50 sports published an open letter to candidates for president of the International Olympic Committee, urging them to keep the spirit of the Games alive by ensuring that sport remains accessible and safe for future generations. The Supreme declined to hear the appeal in Juliana v. United States, ending the case in which youth plaintiffs asserted in their 2015 filing that the government had violated their constitutional rights by encouraging use of fossil fuels. 74 certain other lawsuits with similar strategies were more successful. March, an open letter, my 1,009 administration of U.S. President Donald Trump to stop its wholesale assault on U.S. science, including its blocking of research on climate change and causing researchers to live in a climate of fear amid the administration's flagging of terms such as climate change as objectionable. April, U.S. President Donald Trump dismissed the scientists and experts who compile the National Climate Assessments, NCAAs, that are required by the U.S. Congress, the next assessment having been planned for 2028. 77 within the week, the American Meteorological Society, AMS, and the American Geophysical Union, AGU, said that together they will produce over 29 peer-reviewed journals to cover climate change, that while not claiming they will replace the NCA, they will carry on its work. May, a study of emissions inequality from 1990 to 2020 published in Nature Climate Change concluded that 2/3 of global warming is attributable to the wealthiest 10%, and 20% of warming is attributable to the wealthiest 1%, 70. Numerous other statistics were presented. May reported the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, under U.S. President Donald Trump, said that NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information would no longer update its billion-dollar weather and climate disasters database beyond 2024, and that its information, going as far back as 1980, would be archived. In summary, the committee concludes that the evidence for current and future harm to human health and welfare created by human-caused GHGs is beyond scientific dispute. Much of the understanding of climate change that was uncertain or tentative in 2009 is now resolved, and new threats have been identified. The United States faces a future in which climate-induced harm continues to worsen, and today's extremes become tomorrow's norms. Climate change is the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. All of these predictions were made by stupid people that, of course, their country's fortunes and given those same countries no chance for success. If you don't get away from this green scam, your country is going to fail. 30 June, the globalchange.gov website of the U.S. Global Change Research Program, established in 1990 to host legislatively mandated reports, including the National Climate Assessments, was taken down by the Trump administration. July widely announced the South Pacific island of Tuvalu, with an average elevation 2 meters 6.6 feet above sea level, embarks on a plan to evacuate its entire population due to sea level rise, which is projected to inundate most of the territory at high tide by 2050. 83 Australia formed a migration system allowing 280 Tuvaluans per year to settle in Australia as permanent residents. July, the chief administrator of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced that the Trump administration would rescind the 2009 endangerment finding, which concluded that planet-warming greenhouse gases pose a threat to public health. 84. The endangerment finding is a scientific determination that underpins the U.S. government's legal authority to combat climate change. 84. A 13 August Carbon Brief fact check
concluded that there were at least 100 false or misleading statements in the Trump administration's critical review of impacts of greenhouse gas emissions on the U.S. climate that had been published on 23 July to support rescinding of the endangerment finding. 85 on 30th August, climate experts' review of the DO Climate Working Group report was published as a compendium of comments from 85 climate experts to counter the government's critical review. 86, the government's 5-member climate working group that authored the critical review was dissolved by 5 September in response to a lawsuit filed by the Environmental Defense Fund and Union of Concerned Scientists. 87, on 17 September, the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, NASEM, published a 137-page paper stating that the evidence for current and future harm to human health and welfare created by human-caused GHGs is beyond scientific dispute. 80. 22 September, Climate Action Tracker downgraded the U.S.'s rating from insufficient to critically insufficient, citing U.S. climate action under the Trump administration. March, the OECD's Investing in Climate for Growth and Development concluded that accelerated climate action provides economic gains, specifically that under an enhanced NDCS scenario, global GDP in 2040 would be 0.2% higher than under the current policy scenario. 9 March, U.S. Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth posted on social media website X that the U.S. Department of Defense does not do climate change crap, though a 2018 Pentagon study found that nearly half of all U.S. military sites were threatened by weather linked to climate change. 90, Hegseth also called for a review of mission statements and military planning documents to ensure there are no references to climate change and related subjects, though not prohibiting the Pentagon from assessing weather-related impacts on operations, mitigating weather-related risks, or conducting environmental assessments. 91, the Defense Department had announced cancellation of 91 studies, including research on climate change impacts and global migration patterns, to save about 0.03% of the department's budget in 2024. 92, consensus. 17, April. A study published in Nature Human Behavior found that presenting people with binary climate data, for example, a lake freezing versus not freezing, significantly increases the perceived impact of climate change compared to when continuous data such as temperature change is presented. 93, the researchers said the findings confirmed the boiling frog effect for climate change communication. The results of a 20-country survey published in Nature Human Behavior show strong majority support, including 75% of Europeans and half of Americans, for the global climate scheme, a variant of cap and share, a global carbon price and cash redistribution plan. The study also found widespread support for increased foreign aid or a wealth tax to fund low-income countries. 94, 22 August. Results of a public survey of the Global South published in Nature Climate Change found that scientists are perceived as the most trusted information source in all countries surveyed except Vietnam, and that trust in scientists correlates with increased climate knowledge. Projections. 6 January, a study published in Scientific Reports comparing projected heat-related deaths from climate change with COVID-19 mortality rates across 38 global cities found that in half, annual heat-related deaths would likely exceed COVID-19 death rates within 10 years if global temperatures rise by 3 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The study projected that cities in North America and Europe, particularly in Mediterranean and Central European regions, would have most dramatic increases in projected heat mortality. 3 February, climate risk financial modeling company First Street Foundation projected that by 2055, 70,026 U.S. neighborhoods, 84% of all census tracts may experience $1.47 trillion in net climate-related property value losses, citing insurance pressures and shifting consumer demand. 4 February, a review article published in Nature Reviews Earth and Environment, linking physical climate science with heat mortality risk, projected that human-caused global warming reaching 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels will cause tripling of global land area that is uncompensable, beyond which human core body temperature rises uncontrollably for young adults. A study published in Nature concluded
that the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, is resilient to extreme greenhouse gas and North Atlantic freshwater forcings across 34 climate models, suggesting that an AMOC collapse is unlikely in the 21st century. 28 February, based on the Earth's orbital characteristics, precession, obliquity, and eccentricity. A study published in Science concluded that glacial interglacial periodicity has been largely deterministic in a approximately 100,000 year cycle, and projected that in the absence of human-caused forcing, the next ice age would start in approximately 10,000 years. 5 March. A paper published in Nature cited the International Energy Agency as stating that data centers caused 1 to 1.3% of world electricity demand in 2022, but that, with electricity consumption expected to grow by more than 80% by 2050, owing to all sources, data centers were projected to account for a relatively small share of overall electricity demand growth. 10 March. A study published in Nature Sustainability projected that climate change's cooling of the atmosphere that is occupied by space debris in low Earth orbit will reduce the atmosphere's drag on the debris, extending the debris' lifetime and potentially causing a 50 to 66% reduction in satellite carrying capacity at altitudes 200 to 1,000 kilometers, 120 to 620 in my 45. 12 March. The Boston Consulting Group's Landing the Economic Case for Climate Action with Decision Makers concluded that the net cost of failing to invest to reduce global warming from a current forecast 3 degrees Celsius to 2 degrees Celsius equates to 11% to 27% of cumulative economic output. May noting that current global temperatures have quadrupled the rate of ice sheet loss since the 1990s. A study published in Nature Communications concluded that maintaining current global temperatures will cause several meters of sea level rise over coming centuries, causing extensive loss and damage to coastal populations and challenging the implementation of adaptation measures. May, the World Meteorological Organization projected a 70% chance that the average global warming for 2025 to 2029 will be more than 1.5 degrees Celsius, up from 47% in last year's report for 2024 to 2028. 102. 29 May, a study published in Science estimated that if temperatures remain steady, glaciers globally will lose 39% of their 2020 mass, causing a sea level rise of 113 millimeters, 4.4 in 103, more than twice as much glacier mass was projected to remain at the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius goal, then 2.7 degrees Celsius predicted from current policies, 53% versus 24%, 103. June, a study published in Nature Communications projected that with greater than or equal to 2.8 degrees Celsius global warming, there would be a 1.2 to 3-fold increase in obstructive sleep apnea by 2120. 10 September, a report by Common Goal and Football for Future forecast that by 2050, 14 of 16 World Cup stadiums will face extreme heat conditions, unsafe without adaptation, and 11 stadiums will experience unplayable heat where matches cannot be safely staged or match routes pitch analyzed already breached at least 3 major climate risk thresholds, and 2/3 of grassroots pitches will face unsafe or unplayable heat conditions. 104, 17 September, a study published in Nature projected that if global warming exceeds 2 degrees Celsius, 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit, at least 99% of Western Atlantic coral reefs will be eroding by 2100. 105, 18 September, referring to effects of PM 2.5 fine particulate matter. A study published in Nature projected 34,930 to 98,430 excess deaths per year in the U.S. by 2050 under a high warming scenario, and suggested that the health impacts of climate-driven wildfire smoke could be among the most important and costly consequences of a warming climate in the U.S. 106, 23 September, a study published in Nature Communications projected that many regions may face high risk of day zero drought DZD conditions by the 2020s and 2030s, with the length of time between successive DZD events being shorter DZD durations. Significant publications. Moon Twyla A., Druckenmiller, Matthew L., Tolman, Richard L., editors. Moon Twyla A., Druckenmiller, Matthew L., Tom and Richard L., 2024. Arctic Report Card 2024, PDF. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, Office of Oceanic and Atmospheric Research. DOI, Ken Batmospheric 5923B, B7C7. Archived PDF from the original. Archive Jensen, M. Aronchik, J. Oska, G. Salin, J. Cook, G. Erdely, H. Ford, C. Milani, E. Mustafaraj, F. Ogenga, S. Yadin, P. N. Howard, S. Valenzuela Eds, Elbe Iche, Brun Jensen, Klaus, Aronchik, Melissa, Oska, Yusen, Thalen, Gizem, John, Ford, Heather, Milani, Carlos, Mustafa Raj, Eni, Ogenga, Frederick, Yadin, Sharon, Howard, Philip N., Valenzuela, Sebastian, June 2025, Brule, Robert, Jacket, Jennifer, Lewandowski, Stefan, Roberts, Timmons, EDs. Information Integrity About Climate Science, a Systematic Review, PDF, Zurich, Switzerland, International Panel on the Information Environment, IPY, IPF 1452, BTZP, 30 original, 486. Archived PDF from the original on June 19th, 2025. Guastello Paula, Smith Kelly Helm, Knutson Cody, Svoboda Mark, July 2025. Drought Hotspots Around the World 2023-2025 PDF. Prepared by the United States National Drought Mitigation Center for the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Archived PDF from the original on July 4th, 2025. Obligations of states in respect of climate change. Advisory Opinion PDF. International Court of Justice, July 23rd, 2025. Blunden J. Reagan J. Dunn RJH. August 2025. State of the Climate in 2024, PDF. Journal of the American Meteorological Society, 106.8, S1, S513, Bib Code 2025 BAMS, 106Q, 1 billion, DOI 10.175, 2025, BAMS State of the Climate, 1. See also 2025 in Science. Climatology, SS History. History of Climate Change Policy and Politics. History of Climate Change Science. Politics of Climate Change, SS History. Timeline of Sustainable Energy Research 2020 present. References. External links. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, World Meteorological Organization, WMO. Climate indicators at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Copernicus Climate Change Service, C3S. Abram, Neroli J., Purick, Ariane, England, Matthew H., McCormack, Felicity S. et al. August 20th, 2025. Emerging evidence of abrupt changes in the Antarctic environment, Nature. 644, 8,077, 621 to 633. Bib Code 2025 Nature. 644, 621A, DOI 10.103841586025093495.